From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making an impact across the world. We begin in China, where a violent car rampage tore through a sports stadium and has left at least 41 people dead and many more injured. Authorities say a driver plowed into a crowd at a stadium in the city of Yanji, causing mass panic and chaos. Investigators are working to determine motives for the attack, which took place during a local sports event. Footage of the incident shows rescue crews trying to reach injured spectators trapped under the debris left by the car. Officials have urged the public to remain calm as they continue to look into the incident, which has shocked the country and raised questions about security measures at large events. At least 20 people were killed and 13 others injured in Israeli airstrikes in the Mount Lebanon area. This marks one of the most aggressive daytime assaults to date, with blasts echoing throughout the city and heavy smoke filling the sky. The Lebanese Health Ministry said on Tuesday one strike on the Jun in Shuf district of Mount Lebanon killed 12 people and injured 8. The ministry said another on the town of Balchmi killed 8 and injured 5 others. The ministry added that fighting between Israel and Lebanon's Iran-aligned Hezbollah continued as the Israeli military pounded Beirut's southern suburbs with airstrikes on Tuesday. Israel's newly appointed defense minister Israel Katz said the nation will not agree to a ceasefire without full disarmament of Hezbollah, which controls the targeted areas. He asserted that these strikes will continue until Israel's objectives are met. Meanwhile, drone attacks launched from Lebanon landed in northern Israel, including a strike near a kindergarten in Haifa. No injuries were reported as children were rushed into shelters. Hezbollah, which began escalating tensions last year amid the Gaza conflict, has said it will continue to fight. The ongoing conflict has displaced over 1 million Lebanese residents, and humanitarian organizations warn of escalating civilian casualties if no agreement is reached soon. The chief of the United Nations nuclear watchdog is calling on Iran to cooperate fully ahead of his upcoming visit to Tehran. On the eve of a visit to Tehran, Rafael Grossi, head of the UN's nuclear watchdog IAEA, says the Iran nuclear deal is an empty shell and calls on the country to provide his agency with more visibility given the size, depth, and ambition of Iran's program. In an exclusive interview given to Agence France Presse at the COP29 Climate Summit in Azerbaijan, Grossi has warned that the situation is at a tipping point with growing concerns over Iran's nuclear capabilities and alleged non-compliance with agreements. Grossi expressed concerns over limited access to Iran's nuclear facilities, noting that lack of transparency heightens risks of misunderstanding or conflict. He also urged the international community to focus on open dialogue with Iran to ensure regional security. The IAEA has been pushing for clarity on Iran's nuclear program amid increased tensions with the Middle East, some countries, including Israel, considering Iran's nuclear aspirations a direct threat. Grossi is expected to hold talks aimed at reinforcing safeguards when he arrives in Tehran next week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is taking a direct stance on Iran, saying the Iranian government fears its own people more than it does external enemies like Israel. In comments made earlier today, Netanyahu claimed that widespread public discontent in Iran is a major threat to the regime, suggesting that the leadership in Tehran faces growing unrest. Netanyahu's statement comes amid heightened tensions in the region as Israel pursues strategic airstrikes against Hezbollah and monitors Iran's nuclear program with allies. He reiterated Israel's stance against Iran's military buildup and stated that Israel will not cease efforts to counter Iranian influence in the region. This marks another escalation in the diplomatic war of words between Israel and Iran, with Netanyahu positioning his government as a stabilizing force. against Iranian activities in the Middle East. President-elect Donald Trump is going to nominate former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel. The evangelical Christian is a staunch supporter of Israel and defender of Israel's settlements in the occupied West Bank, considered illegal by most of the international community. Huckabee has criticized President Joe Biden for pressuring Israel to moderate its conduct of the Gaza war. The father of former Trump's White House press secretary Sarah Sanders had twice tried to run for president in 2008 and 2016. A federal jury in the United States has found a defense contractor, CACI or Khaki Premier Technology, legally responsible for the torture and abuse of prisoners at Iraq's notorious Abu Ghraib prison. The verdict, delivered this week, marks a pivotal legal milestone for 3 Iraqi men who brought the suit, alleging Khaki's interrogators directly contributed to or facilitated their abuse. The plaintiffs described experiencing electrocution, severe beatings, mock executions, and physical and psychological humiliation at Abu Ghraib in 2003. Their attorneys argued that Khaki contractors acted outside the law in their interrogation practices, which led to widespread international condemnation and ultimately the closing of the prison. This case has been in U.S. courts for over 15 years, reflecting legal challenges in holding private contractors accountable for actions during military conflicts. Khaki has denied all wrongdoing and plans to appeal the decision. Nonetheless, the jury's verdict reinforces accountability for private contractors working alongside the U.S. military in overseas detention centers. Massachusetts Air National Guard member Jack Teixeira has been sentenced on Tuesday to 15 years in prison for leaking online highly classified military documents, including records related to Russia's war in Ukraine. The 22-year-old was sentenced by U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani in Boston after pleading guilty to perpetrating what U.S. prosecutors called one of the most significant and consequential violations of the Espionage Act in American history. Teixeira, who has remained in custody since his arrest in April 2023, pleaded guilty in March to 6 counts of willful retention and transmission of classified information relating to national defense over a leak last year of a trove of classified records to a group of gamers on the messaging app Discord. More of the latest from around the globe in a moment on World Newsfeed. Stay with us. Welcome back to World Newsfeed. A Spirit Airlines flight destined for the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince was struck by gunfire Monday, forcing it to be diverted to the neighboring Dominican Republic. Spirit said in a statement that the plane from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, had been damaged and taken out of commission upon landing in Santiago. A flight attendant was injured in the incident. No passengers were hurt. Spirit said that it had suspended flights to Port-au-Prince and Cap Haitien pending further evaluation. Dominican President Luis Abinader said his country will treat Haitian gangs as terrorist gangs and urged the United States to declare them in the same terms. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has imposed a ban on U.S. airlines flying to or from Haiti following the incidents. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has announced his resignation, saying it is time for new leadership following a series of sexual abuse scandals in the Church of England. In a somber statement, Welby said that he felt a deep sense of responsibility to let new leaders come in to address these challenges. Welby has served as Archbishop since 2013, has been under intense pressure as new reports of misconduct and cover-ups have surfaced, leading to calls for change in the church's hierarchy. The Associated Press reports his resignation comes after a year of intense scrutiny and demands for accountability from victims' advocates and parishioners alike. The Church of England has pledged to introduce more stringent protective measures and improve transparency, but critics argue that change has been long overdue. Huckabee said he would continue serving until a successor is named. New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon issued a formal apology to survivors of widespread abuse and neglect in the country's state and faith-based care institutions. The apology follows the release of a historic report by the Abuse and Care Royal Commission detailing decades of abuse that affected an estimated 200,000 people between 1950 and 2019. The Commission's 3,000-page report called the abuse a national disgrace, citing instances of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at state-run care institutions and religious organizations. Notably, children, young people, and those with disabilities bore the brunt of this abuse, often facing lifelong trauma as a result. The inquiry revealed Maori children and individuals with disabilities face compounded discrimination and exploitation, underscoring cultural dislocation and harsh treatment within these settings. Prime Minister Luxon acknowledged the bravery of some 2,300 survivors, stating that government will take urgent action to address the report's 138 recommendations. The reforms include creating an independent care safe agency to oversee child and adult care facilities and redress scheme for survivors.
To all of you, I am sorry. I acknowledge the abuse had a devastating impact, not only on you, but also the people closest to you, your partners, children, and grandchildren. Some parents were told that putting their children into state care was the right thing to do. Very often it was not. To those parents, I am sorry that we did not care for your children as if they were our own. To those of you who were tortured at Lake Alice, young, alone, and subjected to unimaginable pain, I am deeply sorry. I'd like to acknowledge those that are not alive to hear this apology. Today we feel you are here with us, and I extend this apology to you, your families, and whānau.
Survivors and advocates are calling for immediate government action to implement these recommendations, emphasizing that any delay only prolongs the trauma survivors have faced for decades. Well, after years of promoting the $500 billion NEOM project as a high-tech desert city, Saudi Arabia's vision seems to be shifting. The CEO of NEOM, Nademi Al-Nawafi, stepping down amid reports that the kingdom is scaling back on some of its most ambitious projects. With Saudi's economy stretched, leaders appear to be focusing on stabilizing spending rather than pushing forward on what have some have called the country's most expensive projects. The change raises questions about the future of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plans. At this year's COP29 climate conference, the host country's leadership sparked controversy by praising oil and gas as a gift of God, arguing that fossil fuels still have a role in the energy mix, even as the world fights climate change. This view has prompted criticism from environmental activists who say the focus should be on renewable energy. The host nation's leader defended his stance, claiming that developing countries depend on oil and gas to boost their economies.
Many other important criteria which should be a basis for kind of evaluation of the country's performance, but not the country's natural resources, which are the gift of the God. When they call us petrostate now, today, this is not fair, and it only demonstrates lack of political culture and knowledge. Today, Azerbaijan's share in global oil production is 0.7. In global gas production is 0.9%. But fake news media of the country, which is #1 oil and gas producer in the world and produces 30 times more oil than Azerbaijan, call us petrostate. They'd better look at themselves.
His remarks come as the UN and climate advocates press for a shift to renewable energy, highlighting the urgency to reduce carbon emissions. Climate groups are expected to protest these remarks, emphasizing that fossil fuel dependence is incompatible with COP29's goals to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The world is on a final countdown to limit global warming, and time is not on our side. That warning coming from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres during the COP29 summit in Baku, Azerbaijan. In a speech, Guterres tells world leaders to pay up to prevent climate-led humanitarian disasters.
In our global economy, supply chain shocks raise costs everywhere. Decimated harvests push up food prices everywhere. Destroyed homes increase insurance premiums everywhere. And this is a story of avoidable injustice. The rich cause the problem, the poor pay the highest price. So doubling down on fossil fuels is absurd. The clean energy revolution is here. No group, no business, and no government can stop it. But you can and must ensure it is fair and fast enough to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Nearly 200 countries are attending the annual UN Climate Summit this year. Their focus is to raise hundreds of billions of dollars to fund a global transition to cleaner energy sources. Guterres says he's confident a deal will be reached. And that is all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us again tomorrow when we bring you the world in 30 minutes only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money comes next. Keep it here on BNC.